Look at this position. It's not a spectacular combination. There's no immediate checkmate, no crazy sacrifices, and yet, for black, this game is completely won. The fundamental issue here is that the vast majority of players would not know how to win it. Not because they don't know how to move the pieces, but because they don't know what plan to follow. And this is where a lot of won games are lost. Today, we're going to begin our analysis directly from this endgame position, a position that is clearly and significantly favorable for black, and I'm going to demonstrate to you exactly how to convert it into a win using good technique. That is step by step without theory, okay? Just by understanding what's going on, making concrete decisions, and having clear ideas. If you've ever reached a better end game or a better middle game and didn't win, this video is going to help open your eyes. The fundamental concept here is that black has an incredibly significant amount of pressure on the d4 pawn structure. Probably all of you who already have a lot more experience with these kinds of endgames and play chess more often will understand that an isolated pawn in an endgame is a clear target for attack. An isolated pawn, for those of you who don't know, is a pawn that doesn't have any fellow pawns on its adjacent files. Therefore, it can't be easily defended. We have the same pieces as our opponent, so whenever we want, we can keep up the pressure. However, of course, many of you might be thinking, if I attack the pawn with two pieces and they defend it with two, I'm never going to be able to win that pawn or find a way to press for a win in the game. First of all, we need to know, excuse me, okay, that the material is completely equal. Therefore, we should try to put some pressure on our opponent somehow. We would love it if this pawn on b4 didn't exist. I'm going to move it aside for a moment. If it didn't exist, we would have the move c5, which would be a really good move, taking advantage of the pin on the d4 pawn. Obviously, the pawn couldn't be captured because we would take the rook. And so, since they couldn't capture it, we would capture, and we'd have an extra pawn. In these kinds of very equal endgames, if either side manages to get an extra pawn, they'll end up winning the game. So we've already found our main plan to eliminate this pawn on b4. If you like this style of videos, let me know in the comments, okay? I really think this will help you a lot and will make you improve your level. The 5. You understand this move? The idea is that now, after this a5, if they decide to capture this pawn, we'll simply recapture with the queen, start putting pressure on this a3 square, which is hard to defend, and above all, if they start defending it, they'll have to move away from defending this other pawn. So, without a doubt, capturing this pawn is not a good idea. Here, in this game, white decides to move the king to h1. A smart move. Why? Because they were putting themselves in range of a possible queen of b6, which could end up in a dangerous check later on by capturing this pawn with a pawn and queen. You see it, right? So here, now how should we continue? Obviously, we'll capture this pawn here. And after the exchanges, what have we managed to create? It's true that we still can't play this c5 move, which is the one we want, but we've created a second weakness. Remember this principle, because it can help you in many positions. When we already have a weakness and we're attacking it a lot, but we see that we can't make progress, we can try to create another weakness. In this case, it's the weakness at the b4 square. Right, so how can we proceed now? Well, now that we have two weaknesses, let's keep putting pressure on them. For example, with this queen to d6 move, we keep pressuring the d4 square with both pieces, and we also introduce a new threat to the b4 square. Here, if white didn't have any resources, we would have already won a pawn, and pretty much the game, since this endgame with an extra pawn is much easier to win. What happens is that here, white has a very nice resource, which is the following: queen to b1. And here, many of you might be thinking, okay, chess teacher, it's true that this move defends the b4 square, but at the same time, it's moving one of the two defenders away from the d4 square, and now I can capture the pawn with the rook. Well, no, that's not possible, because if we capture the pawn with the rook, then comes queen to b2. Careful, careful, don't lose focus. And this rook would end up being lost, since it's completely pinned and attacked by two pieces. And it can't be defended by the pawn because the pawn on b4 prevents it. So we have to be very careful not to capture this pawn. So how do we proceed? How do we continue then? Well, then we need to do something different. For example, put pressure on this weakness here. We're playing between the two weaknesses we've managed to create. Now, it seems like there's no way, right, to defend this pawn on b4 with any other piece. The queen defends it, yes, but the rook can't get there because the pawn is in the way here, and the queen is here, right? So here, what do the white pieces do? They find resources. This is something I also recommend to all of you. If you see that your position is lost or you're at a disadvantage, instead of giving up, obviously not, look for resources. In this case, white tries this resource of queen to a1, looking for some kind of discovered attack. Now then, are we really interested in just capturing this pawn and letting them give us a discovered check? Nah, because then the game could get complicated for us. Is there any need to complicate the game? No. And patience is an attribute that will help you win a lot of games. They still can't defend anyway. So I just move my king away from the queen's extremely dangerous diagonal. And that's it. Simply put, they won't be able to do anything anymore. Careful, they still have some resources, but we're going to keep being patient. Queen to a2. They're attacking the f7 square, so what do I do now? Well, we have several solutions, right? The main one that comes to mind would be, for example, to play king to g7. But what would happen then? We'd be in the same situation. So here, the player with the black pieces played king to g8, and here the player with the white pieces said, well, I'm going to keep looking for resources with queen to h8, and if you go back to either g7 or h7, I'll bring the queen back again. And here we would keep repeating moves, and it would look like a draw. However, as we can see, we have a winning endgame. We can trade queens with queen to f8. Now white is in a dilemma, right? They have two options, either trade queens or move the queen away. If they move the queen away, what's the big problem? Let's suppose they go, for example, with the queen over here. We would capture this pawn here, either with a rook or with a queen. Therefore, they would lose the pawn no matter what. The only way possible they can hold their position for a little bit longer is to exchange their queens, which is exactly what happened in the game, and now they must actively defend the b4 square with the rook. Do you see it? What happened here? Well, for now, it seems like we don't have any advantage, because if we attack this pawn, they defend this pawn. If we attack the other, they defend the other. And now what, chess teacher? You don't have an extra pawn, and you can't attack any weaknesses. Well, as you can see, in the endgame, the most important thing in the world is always the kings. And in this case, our king is closer to the action than the opponent's king. And together with that, since our opponent has two weaknesses because they have two isolated pawns, that's going to end up giving us the game without any problem. Understand this, okay? Even though it might seem to an amateur player that this position is completely equal because it's 5 pawns against 5 pawns, the position is actually 1 for black because there are two weaknesses, and on top of that, the king is closer. I'll show you. The king keeps advancing to come and apply pressure, king to d5, and even though it looks like the white king gets there in time to defend, now we simply slip in through c4. Now, for real, there's no way to defend this b4 square anymore, simply with the rook, and it's attacked with both king and rook. Now white looks for counterplay, as always. They'll never make it easy for you. King to e4. Could we just take here directly? Yes, in the game, f5 check was played first, posing a dilemma for the white pieces. The dilemma is, what do you want to do with the king? Come over here to defend this pawn, but without any counterattack? Or try to come over here to take the pawns, giving up this pawn, but at least having a counterattack. That's what they did. But simply after rook takes b4, obviously white doesn't want to trade rooks, because that's all they have left. Rook to c1 check, king takes d4. And obviously this is an endgame with two extra pawns. No matter how much the player with the white pieces now tries to bring the king in through g5 to take this pawn here, it wouldn't help them at all, because, for example, after king to g5, we could calmly continue with the advance of c5, and this pawn will be completely unstoppable with the help of our king and also our rook. Notice something important. We didn't win this game because I calculated better than anyone else. We won them because this position belongs to a type of positions that are always won in the same way. When you know how to recognize this kind of position, chess stops being chaotic. You stop improvising, you stop just seeing what happens, and you start playing with confidence. This kind of endgames, advantages, and clear plans are exactly what we've studied and explained in winning models, without tricks or weird openings. These are real positions, real ones, taken from grandmaster games that show you how to turn an advantage into a win. If this video has helped you and you finally feel like everything makes sense, then down below you'll find access to winning models. And if not, just remember this: games aren't won by a single brilliant move, but by dozens of correct decisions. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you tomorrow, as always, in the next one, friends. Bye.